Before sunrise in the Strait of Hormuz, everything can look calm right up until the moment it stops being calm forever. At 4:17 a.m., a U.S. Navy Arleigh Burke-class destroyer was pushing east through one of the world's most dangerous waterways. On paper, it was a routine transit. In reality, it was moving into a space where geography favored the side that had studied every lane, every reaction, and every rule. The Strait of Hormuz is narrow, crowded, and predictable. Oil tankers follow fixed routes. Warships are forced into limited maneuvering room. Surveillance assets can watch movement for hours and build a picture of what a captain is likely to do before the captain ever has to do it. That is what makes the Strait so valuable in peacetime and so dangerous in a crisis. It is not just a choke point for energy, it is a choke point for decisions. Iranian planners understood that better than most. They knew a modern destroyer was too heavily armed to be rushed head-on by one threat alone. So the answer was not a single attack. The answer was to create a sequence, force the ship to turn, fix its attention in one direction, make it commit to a rescue, then strike from several angles before supporting aircraft could arrive. The bait was simple, a distress call. A broken voice on an open maritime channel is hard to ignore, especially in waters where fishermen, smugglers, patrol boats, and military units all operate close together. If people are believed to be in the water, a warship is expected to respond. That expectation became the center of the trap. Long before the destroyer heard the call, the ambush was already in motion. Iranian aircraft were airborne. A coastal anti-ship missile team had taken a concealed firing position. A submarine waited in silence below the surface. Smaller, fast-attack craft stood ready for the final phase. Each element had a role. None of them needed to win alone. They only needed the destroyer to react the way a disciplined Navy ship is trained to react. At 4:28 a.m., the radio message came through. A fishing vessel was reportedly under attack. Several men were said to be in the water. The transmission sounded distorted, weak, and urgent enough to feel real. The destroyer altered course. That change mattered more than speed. The ship was no longer simply transiting. It was now committing attention, sensors, and maneuver to a humanitarian response inside a pre-built kill area. For the officers in the Combat Information Center, the picture had changed instantly from navigation to uncertainty. 2 minutes later, the first clue appeared not on the horizon, but on the screens. Radar behavior from the north suggested fighter aircraft were no longer just present. They were preparing to engage. Moments after that, the electronic warning environment sharpened. Fire control signatures began to form. That was the point where suspicion ended. The ambush had started. The destroyer's crew moved the way trained crews do when there is no time for drama. Air defense operators began sorting tracks by threat priority. The bridge ordered aggressive maneuvering. Defensive launchers were armed. Close-in weapons shifted from standby to readiness. The flight detachment prepared the helicopter for immediate launch if the underwater picture turned active. Then the first missiles came. Air-launched weapons were fired from outside visual range, forcing the destroyer to defend against threats it could not see with the naked eye. The ship answered with layered interception. Long-range missiles were used to break the first attack before it could compress the fight. Some threats died far from the hull. Others made it closer. That is always the reality of missile defense. Success is measured in distance bought, seconds gained, and fragments kept out of the ship. The next wave came from shore. Anti-ship missiles launched off the coast and dropped low over the water, using speed and sea-skimming flight to reduce reaction time. The destroyer was now under pressure from multiple directions at once. It had to keep turning to spoil targeting solutions, but every turn changed which weapons had the best angle to fire back. Forward systems gained 1 second, lost another, and fought for every clean shot. One incoming missile was destroyed in the outer layer. Another survived deeper into the engagement and had to be met by close-in defenses. The ship's guns opened up. Tracers reached into the dark. The missile shattered short of impact, but debris and blast still punished the destroyer. Antennas were damaged. External equipment was torn up. Sailors on exposed sections of the ship were hit by fragments. The ship was still alive, but now it was wounded. That mattered, because damage changes sound, heat, electromagnetic signature, and confidence. A damaged ship is easier to track, easier to predict, and harder to command smoothly under pressure. Iranian planners had counted on that. Their submarine, which had waited in silence through the opening of the fight, now had a better chance of locating the target by noise alone. Below the surface, the submarine began its approach. Above the surface, the destroyer's helicopter lifted off from a deck made hazardous by smoke, foam, and scattered metal. Its mission was brutally clear: find the underwater threat before the underwater threat reached firing position. Sonobuoys went into the sea. Acoustic data began to build. The destroyer and helicopter were now working the same problem from different angles, trying to turn a vague underwater suspicion into a confirmed firing solution. They almost ran out of time. Torpedo warning came suddenly. There was no long, dramatic build. Once a wake-homing weapon is in the water at close range, the timeline becomes violent and short. The destroyer threw itself into evasive maneuver. Acoustic decoys were deployed. Compartments were sealed. Damage control teams braced for the possibility that the next sound they heard would be steel tearing open below the waterline. The helicopter got the final contact it needed and attacked. That changed everything beneath the surface. One of the incoming torpedoes was pulled off by deception. The other stayed dangerous, driving in toward the ship as the destroyer fought to outrun geometry and mechanical limits. Then, just before impact seemed unavoidable, the submarine itself was struck first. Its control vanished. Guidance to the torpedo broke. The weapon continued forward briefly, blind and unstable, and missed. The destroyer had survived the underwater part of the trap, but the fight was not over. The fighter aircraft pressed in again. With portions of the destroyer's sensor suite damaged, the crew had to rebuild the air picture through surviving systems and offboard support. That meant combining what the ship could still see with what the helicopter could feed back. Even with that patchwork, the margin was thin. Another missile volley came in. This one was the closest yet. One threat was engaged successfully before reaching the ship. Another got through far enough to detonate near the hull, killing sailors on the forward section and starting a dangerous fire near missile cells. That is the moment where many battles are actually decided not by the launch, not by the hit, but by whether the crew can keep the ship in the fight while the deck is burning and people are down. The destroyer's crew did exactly that. Fire teams attacked the blaze with foam and seawater. Medical teams established casualty stations. Power was rerouted around damaged systems. Operators stayed on their consoles. The ship kept maneuvering. That discipline is easy to describe after the fact and hard to appreciate in the moment. Men were dead, others were bleeding, equipment was failing, and the crew still had to keep fighting as if the next 10 seconds would decide the entire night. Because they would. What the Iranian side did not fully understand was that the destroyer had not been as isolated as it appeared. U.S. naval aviation had already been moving in response to unusual activity in the region. Support aircraft had been watching from outside the immediate engagement area, building the broader picture the destroyer itself could not see. So when the Iranian fighters prepared for another pass, they were no longer hunting alone. They were being hunted. 2 U.S. Navy Super Hornets entered the fight from beyond the battle space the Iranian pilots believed they controlled. The timing was decisive. One Tomcat was hit and destroyed before it could disengage cleanly. The second tried to break back toward land, but a short-range missile caught it before escape was possible. Just like that, the air cover for the ambush was gone. Iranian fast attack boats then surged from the coast in a last attempt to keep the destroyer under pressure. Their purpose was not elegant. They were there to exploit confusion, fire rockets and heavy guns, and force more maneuver while any surviving shore units tried to reset. They ran into a ship that was still angry and still armed. The destroyer's main gun opened first. Secondary weapons followed. The helicopter joined the surface fight from above. The attacking boats began to disappear one by one, some destroyed outright, some burning, some turning away crippled. Those that tried to hide among commercial traffic found that concealment ends quickly when combat aircraft are overhead. By then, The trap had reversed direction. Instead of merely surviving, the destroyer and its support were now identifying and eliminating the systems that built the ambush in the first place. Coordinates for coastal missile elements were passed. U.S. strikes followed. Launch vehicles, radar support, and nearby logistics positions were hit. What had started as a carefully layered attack on a single ship turned into the systematic dismantling of the units that made the attack possible. By a little after 5 in the morning, the destroyer had cleared the heart of the kill zone. It was damaged. Sailors were dead. Many were wounded. Parts of the ship were burned, broken, or offline. But it was still moving under its own power, still under control, and still capable of fighting. That alone meant the ambush had failed. At sunrise, the balance sheet was brutal. The United States had paid in blood and damage. Iran had paid in aircraft, boats, personnel, and the destruction of the strike architecture it had prepared so carefully. The fake distress call, the layered missile plan, the submarine intercept, the fast boat pressure phase, all of it had depended on one assumption: that a destroyer forced into a narrow box would stay trapped there long enough to be finished. It did not. For a short stretch of that night, the kill zone worked exactly as designed. The ship turned, the attacks arrived in sequence. Damage accumulated, the water grew narrower with every second. And then the destroyer kept fighting. That is what broke the trap. Not luck, not one weapon, not one aircraft. It was layered defense, disciplined crews, damage control under fire, and support already moving before the ambush fully closed. In a place as tight and dangerous as the Strait of Hormuz, those things matter more than any single missile ever will. Because sometimes the real battle is not about who fires first. It is about who is still operational when the plan goes wrong.